Welcome to the Cafe Nightly Show. I'm your host, the Goldsmith. It is the first of March, 2024, and the cycles for our totems did not start again. We're not in cycle 2. We're gonna have to see when that happens, but we did have a lot of nothing for announcements today. We had a couple things that did kind of drop in, slide in there a little bit on the upwind side, kind of tying into this theme of we can stealth release. Again, this is on the side of upwind. There are certain things they feel they don't have to announce because they don't want everyone queuing up for whatever the event is, and we'll talk about the reality of queuing up and whether or not that queuing is still happening. Hi, California Trading Company. We can see what the reality of that really is, but ultimately, with the idea of people having bots that are going to let them know whenever a new neighborhood gets opened up, it's probably not too surprising to the people who are actually going to participate. I do want to put that idea out there. We'll have a little discussion on that. And then, of course, the first ever, I'm going to say stealth, and maybe some people won't say stealth because it's 24 hours. It's just not a large announcement. We've got a wearable that's out. Nothing major, one wearable. But Upwind didn't feel the need to put a whole announcement out for a sale. And I would argue that maybe they shouldn't have been putting out an announcement for every single sale running up until now. But we can look at what this might mean. Again, small thing. Maybe it has some implications. Maybe it tells us what's going to be happening down the road. Otherwise, definitely is worth noting that now that we have transportation, cars as transportation, we've seen a little bit of the travel. We've seen a little bit of that looks like, so we can take it and revisit what that concept is and how it's working for people. And then finally, as we start to move into racing in the game of Upwind, I'm going to revisit the leaderboards. I'm going to revisit a couple pieces, a couple line items in that there's still a little bit of confusion, and it's good to revisit these things. It's good to reread them, and it's good to have managed expectations. What's going to happen over the next couple weeks of racing as we head towards the end of frost season. And with that, let's get it out of the way up front. All views and opinions expressed by myself, they're mine and mine alone. They should not be taken as game strategy or financial advice. Any views or opinions I do express, they don't represent the game or the team of Upwind. Any guests, any contributors who we do have on, none tonight, but if we did have them on, their views, their opinions would be their own. They wouldn't represent myself, the Goldsmith, the Cafe Nightly Show, the game, or the team of Upwind. Easy enough. So up front, let's take a look. We have a brand new neighborhood in the city of Trenton. I'm going to make a couple arguments here. I'm going to make one argument that says, since we are on a third expansion of the city of Trenton, maybe it was time to do a little bit of expansion on the other side, on the West Coast, on Stockton. Maybe it was time. If you go and look in Stockton, we're going to take a quick second. We're going to pop it up here. Give me a second to get my game shared, my screen shared, so we can all see it together. If you are on Discord, if you're not on Discord, you can't see it. But I'll be as descriptive with the audio as we can be. If we go and take a look in Stockton, we're going to see that we still have a lot of properties that aren't yet sold on the FSA side of things. Let's get ourselves over to Stockton. We were still in the Bronx. There we go. Let's get back over. We're going to see there's a lot of properties that aren't yet all sold out. And again, for me, that is not the end of the world. I know we have to do the expansions on the FSAs before they have entirely sold out. But if I come down here into the southern part, in the southern neighborhood that we do have, here we go, in Stockton, let's get our lines up so we can actually see them. Boop, boop. On the southern portion of Stockton, we're going to see that there's still a lot down here in FSA land that's not sold yet. There's a lot here that's still there for stock. So the argument that, hey, should we get the West Coast represented here with some of these expansions, as we've been getting these expansions in Trenton, ultimately the percentage of unminted properties in Stockton exceeds the unminted properties in Trenton. That's why we had the expansion. However, there's going to be an argument that you're going to hear from me, and it's going to be echoed and parroted by a lot of other people that says the consideration that Upland has put out for why they are treating each of these neighborhood expansions as being different, being differentiated from what we've done in the past. The fact that they don't want to make announcements, the fact that they just want to drop them and have people discover them on their own, um, being tied to it being new players. So they don't want existing players. They don't want long-term players necessarily lining up and getting prepared for these long term. They don't want existing players having to put the put in the extra effort in getting to the cities early, and trying to mint out properties that otherwise are meant to be there for other players. That argument makes some sense, except for a couple factors. It doesn't make sense when you have a neighborhood that's 100% over 150,000 UPEX. If that's the mint price you're looking at, 150,000 being on the lower side of things, then I definitely think that the argument that we are, and unfortunately our property lines are not working as well as they should right now. That argument that we have to worry about those FSA players, and those FSA players don't need to know and have an advance notice of when these portions of the cities are minting. It doesn't necessarily line up. I still get if Upland doesn't want to promote them, if they want to have the same mentality, same thought on the on the properties or every neighborhood in the city as they do for the ones that are primarily FSA. I get that. I understand that. That's fine if that's what they want to do. But we can definitely take a grain of salt when they say it's because of the FSA concentration, because this is a neighborhood that could have sat. Hiltonia could have sat there for I don't know, at least to the end of the city before it got dropped. It could have been put out as prizes, or it could have been treated differently than any other neighborhood in the city. We've had other neighborhoods that, there we go, finally our lines are with us. We've had other neighborhoods in the game of Upland that have been treated differently than the rest of their cities. We have Marble Island, or up in, here we go, up in we got to Manhattan. We can take a look at it. Marble Hill up here. There it is. In Marble Hill, we had the same thing. Yes, they didn't mint when they were supposed to. It was kind of differentiated or held up in the mapping, but they held them for a long period of time. They could have released them earlier. They released it as a special differentiated set. They didn't release it as they would have an expansion of Manhattan. They had a special way it was sold. There was a benefit for Ukraine when it was done. There was still a queuing in line and everything, but there was a special way those properties were sold. And I would see that as being the case if you had a special circumstance, if a certain neighborhood of a city was that differentiated from the rest of the city. And I would argue that a rare neighborhood in a city that's primarily built for FSA, that is a classic release as opposed to a vanilla release, meaning that the minting properties, or the property values at mint, are way higher than they would be normally, because you have that multiplier that's applied before anyone gets that first chance to mint. I would argue that's a different enough neighborhood that we could have releases in a different way than we're releasing the rest of the city. Again, that's intended for FSA. Again, not FSA properties. We can see here. Let me see what we can see on these properties. There we go. We can see here on this property. This is one of the smaller properties in the neighborhood. We can see if we get a real small property here. Real teeny tiny little skinny little guy. We'll get a small property over here. 87. Again, not small by many city standards. Pretty small by this neighborhood standards. We are looking at that being 1,400 UPX monthly earnings standalone without the collection applied, aka the mint on that was about 11 and a half, 12. Yeah, 125,000, 125,000 mint price. On that math, you're not going to find somebody with a value under 100K minting that property. Those are the smallest properties in the area. They're all over 100K for the properties from minted there originally. We could have done it differently. That's my little argument on Hiltonia. And just a little bit of the recap, a little bit of the history. These did release. Hiltonia came up at about 6 o'clock this morning Eastern time. That's the majority of North America was in bed, which is absolutely fine. Again, When people talk about fairness on this, people say, "Oh, it's not fair. This happened this way. It should have been done differently." Because the way they released this, a small portion of people took advantage of that. I'm going to agree with that. Upland could have done it differently so that a small portion of players did not get the main benefit. Keep in mind that it's not the guy who just happened to check it every hour for days and days and days on end. Ultimately, people do have, they have bots, they have listing bots, they have bots that are going to say, this popped up on the market. This just popped up in the market. This popped up in the market 15% below mint in UpX. Okay, now I'm going to go see that property. Now I'm going to go try to buy it. And they follow the minting, the listing, as opposed to going and actually happen upon that on the overall market. So that is something that exists. We know it exists. It also exists to tell when new neighborhoods or new areas have been added. So somebody got an alert. They went to mint properties. They may have told somebody, and then that news spreads, and a small number of people get involved, and the city is minted out before anyone can get in there. You have people with 10 or 15 properties, and other people were just sleeping without a full announcement on that. Again, as long as these tools are within TOS, many of them are, having a service that just says, hey, this has happened, or this just happened in the game of Upland. If that is something that you have that's working for you on your side, I'm not necessarily outing anybody here as we go, but if that's a tool that you have working for you inside and it's within TOS, then you're not really doing anything wrong. But if Upland constructed the release in a different way, you wouldn't have 7 people or 10 people, or I think in this case probably 25 people, eating up 200 and something rares. That's just a thought moving forward. But in terms of people saying this is not fair to the community that Upland chose to do it this way, I think fairness is kind of a slanted slope, or at least a very hard topic to approach in Upland, because the idea that 90% of the releases happen at a specific time, and that is good or better for people in certain time zones, whereas in certain time zones 90% of the time it's a really bad time. It's a really bad time zone. I think that if we're going to have fairness arguments, we kind of have to look at that. And ultimately, Upland builds around their own schedule. Upland does what's good for Upland. They want to occasionally and introduce a little bit of variability. They want to introduce a little bit of the play the game, discover the game, learn as you go. We've had other parts of the game like totems where Upland could have told us more information very, very easily. They disclosed a little bit, and then they created a situation where certain people were going to learn faster. People were going to have to share information. Some people would share information faster. Some people would avail themselves of resources. Some people wouldn't. But ultimately, you had a situation where small number of people figure things out. That information gets disseminated, and that is how the larger community does better or did better with totems later in the cycle. And the same thing here. You had a couple of people who figured it out. They told somebody, the news spread, and the area got minted out very quickly. And again, that's something that I think is par for the course in Upland. That it is one of the things they want to do. And again, if I can argue that they do things differently, I hope they look into it. But I think fairness isn't the right language. I think the right language is make it special. If Hiltonia is that special in Trenton, it's a rare neighborhood. It's meant to stand out among all the other portions that are FSA. Upland's trying to put Trenton up as an FSA city. Treat that neighborhood a little different. Just to say we're celebrating what Trenton is, why we have Trenton, the fact that we want to have expansions to invite in new players. And oh, by the way, these properties that don't fit into that model, let's make those special for the people who they do qualify for, the people who are designed to have those properties. That's it. To look at the other little bit of the hint, wink, wink, nod, hope you see it, hope you didn't miss it, opportunity. It's right here in the Upland store. I think we're at the point in the game of Upland where they don't have to tell us every single thing that's happening. People who want to know are going to look, and people who want to know are going to listen. If their buddy says, "Hey, I saw this new thing up in the store. You got 24 hours to register." 24 hours is a long time to get in and register, at least if you are logging in on a daily basis. If you're logging in on a daily basis, if you are tied in with multiple people in the game, I think that that is kind of going to be something that stands out to you as an opportunity. You use your community members, you use the people you're working with to give you information along the way. And this Frost officer uniform, I'll make a couple jokes on it and then get back to what it represents. Frost officer, I don't know, maybe we'll go with freeze suckers. I don't know, something of that nature. But the Frost officer, we don't know exactly what he's there for. I don't know if it's supposed to be, some military officer in some dystopian future. I'm not sure if we're talking about, uh, you know, uh, policing the penguins or whatever the notion here is. I don't know. Maybe up in the North Pole, if you ran the candy cane stoplight, he's going to tell you to pull over. But I don't know. I'll plan coming up with their own ideas that don't really have any direct tie into mythology, or at least in a direct mythology, but kind of have tangential concepts of maybe an AI could come up with something like that. I think that's what we're going to see a little bit. Again, we've talked about this concept that Upland had some partnerships, and maybe they'll continue to pursue partnerships. But then they kind of saw this opportunity to come up with their own IP, especially with the assistance of AI, where they can take a concept and kind of build on that concept, and they don't need to have necessarily a name brand behind them to do it, because Upland's going to be that name brand. Um, this uniform, it is what it is. I don't think it looks that bad. I can joke on it. I can say I've never heard of a Frost officer. I don't know what type of tickets he's writing, or if he's handing you, I don't know, a sheet of ice if you get pulled over. But I don't think it's the worst piece of wearable in the world. I think actually it's kind of cool. I think once we have these in the plaza, in the cafes, it'll be fun to see those on people, those costumes on people. So not a bad sale. So what we're looking at is no official announcement for me to read to you, but we can read the details here. 15,000 UPIX is the price, and I'm going to do this. This is the first time in a long time that Upland has put something up to purchase in the store for UPIX. And I think we can make a differentiation, or Upland can make a differentiation and say, we're going to sell some things, limited things, direct to consumer. When we sell things direct to consumer, we can sell those in UPIX. When we're selling things to MetaVentures, as they have done the last several MetaVenture sales, 100% in USD, no UPIX option. Again, I got UPIX. What do I have right now? 250,374 UPIX. I had a lot more this morning. I went on a spending spree. Go figure. But I had a lot more UPIX. I could have been sitting on 500,000 UPIX right now. That 500,000 UPIX, I would love to go in and buy a car bundle in UPIX if Upland give me that opportunity to do so. But they're overall leaning towards the USD side of things. I do take a second to clap and say congratulations and thank you, Upland, for being so gracious and giving us an UPIX sale. I like the idea of UPIX sales. I think we can continue to have them. And again, I have no problem with USD sales so long as we have a reason to be accumulating UPIX. We have a place to use it. We talked about the differentiation of many, many times over between USD and UPIX and them being differentiated markets. And giving people less things to do with their UPIX, Upland giving people less things to do with their UPIX, and encouraging people more to purchase on the USD side if they want to buy certain things. That actually doesn't help the divide. That doesn't bring things closer together. In some ways, it might fracture it. It might make UPIX a secondary currency. Maybe people don't want to accept UPIX to have things bought because there's less things they can do with it. They can't take it to the store, the Upland store, and buy things. So that is something I want to see Upland consider. The value and the purpose of UPIX at this time and moving forward, and how do we continue to maintain that value and that use case if we're going to be focusing more and more on USD sales. I hope Upland considers that. Maybe we have more of those sales like we did have with totems, where some were in USD and some were in UPX. We saw it with NFLPA. We saw good sell through in the NFLPA, not perfect. Good sell through on both the USD and the UPX side, depending on what package was being sold. Obviously, better sell through on some than others. We had full sell through on both the USD and the UPX side for totems. So we do have that opportunity for that model to work. I would challenge Upland to consider if they're going to scale the USD and the UPX sales to some degree where that 1,000 to 1 margin is not followed. Again, up to Upland if they're going to do that or not. They may not want to. They may not want to encourage that division or at least solidify that division between the two markets. But it would be fun to see more opportunities to spend our UPX to get these assets in the first market, to get these assets direct from Upland. With that, again, this sale is happening tomorrow. We've got 12 hours, 29 minutes, 50 seconds left to register if you haven't yet. Mine is gray. That means I've already registered. It would be green if I hadn't. So that is something that's going to happen tomorrow. And if we look down here, we're going to see that we also have some sales coming up. Look at this. 3 to 8 a.m. PT. Okay, for a sale tomorrow. Look at that. Look at that. It looks like it's going to be happening at the same time. So this will be up at the same time as we have that Spark sale tomorrow. Registration for the Spark sale is open now. Get registered if you want to be part of that sale. If you want to be part of the Frost Officer uniform sale, get registered. Just a quick reminder on the Spark sale. We have a total of 30 available of the 0.05 bundles, $29.99. The 30 again of the 0.1 Spark bundles, $54.99. The 0.25 Spark bundles, there's only 10 of those available, $129.99. 15 of the 0.5 Spark bundles, $239.99, and 15 of the 1 Spark bundles, $459.99, essentially $460. Well, a couple things to note here. Obviously, there's more of the 1 Spark and the 0.5 Spark than there is of the 0.25 Spark. I think that ties into and follows where the demand has been on these before. Keep in mind, there's a discount for buying the larger sets than the smaller sets. But the other thing to keep in mind is look how low these numbers are compared to our previous numbers. Drum roll, please. We have Spark weeks now instead of Spark. Oh, sorry, we have Spark weekends instead of Spark weeks. With a Spark week, it was something that happened once a month. It's something that people had to wait a month for, 2 months for, when we didn't have them every month, when they were pushed out in between. And you would have whatever quantity of Spark available in that 1 week, and then you wait another month and sell to more Spark in that next sale. We are going to do our Spark weekends every weekend in a season. It sounds like that's something that may be moving forward. It's what we're doing in Frost season, at least now. And then taking a break for the 2 weeks or 2 weekends in between the 2 seasons, in between, in this case, Frost season and Blossom season. So with that in mind, we are going to see these sales more often, these Spark sales. I expect to see Upland following that limited per weekend sale. The idea that, as people come to needing the Spark, they're going to be closer to the next sale, which again, every weekend inside the season. If that continues on, we'll be seeing that happen within every season and having a break in between. The caveat that Upland can make a change there. And then we are going to also see that is a great opportunity for people to level up. They don't have to wait a month or a month and a half to level up when they get there. You have to hit a button once you reach your new level. In the case of most players, they have to kind of question whether they want to take that 20% bonus, which is a really great bonus, and hopefully you take it, 20% bonus, or accept the Spark more quickly, in a sooner time, because they want to have that Spark so they can utilize it, as opposed to wait an undetermined period of time. Now that if you're only waiting a week, it's not that big of a deal to wait a week. It's annoying to have to, click around it and have the box pop up when you get to your account status and just make sure you're not pushing the button. That can be a difficult thing to have to deal with, but you only have to deal with it for a week instead of months potentially. So that is a nice thing with our Spark weekends, and we will likely see that continue to be the case. Well, we have a couple other things moving forward. Okay, as I mentioned, this idea that we don't yet have any information on the next cycle of totems. I would have loved it to be sooner rather than later. I would have loved it to start at that beginning of the month, so I could say, here's 30 days. There we go. It could theoretically start anytime, but it's really interesting to see this break start to expand on us. Our last was essentially January was the first cycle. Because there was a little bit of a grace period in game, started a 5-day grace period. It went into the early part of February for many people. And then we started our countdown clock, or I did anyways internally. We're saying, okay, cycle 2 is coming. Cycle 2 is coming. It hasn't started yet. Maybe it's coming next week. And now we're still on that countdown. I'm going to take a step back and take a deep breath and see what happens. Again, we're at a point where I sincerely hope we don't wait until April. Up until this, it was going to be 5 cycles of totems before we had life, before we had Protem being exchanged for step. I was okay with that. I am okay with that. But the longer it takes us to get through those 5 cycles, the later it is before life comes to the game. I was pretty excited about having life come into the game. So I hope that we start seeing our totem cycles sooner rather than later. I'll keep my eyes out, and I hope you do too. Let's get into 2 or 3 other things here, small. Again, we are going to look at a little bit of a leaderboard. Let's get that up so we can see the leaderboard action in front of us. Upland Racing Series. This is a new announcement. Announcement 27, updated today. Adjusted rules for seasonal finals race. There is a reason to go and check back on some of our announcements every once in a while. That was today. Adjusted the rules on the season for the seasonal finals. Let's go take a look at that. On the 27th, we did have an adjustment. Keep in mind, there was this weird thing about staking for a few hours, and people weren't sure about what was going on there. You're doing math and how many people were in part of the race, and they made it a lot easier. It's the rules, or what was being paid out, was determined by the number of people. There's a bonus there for the number of people in the race, but then everything else is by the stake value, per player stake value. Pretty easy to get that figured out. I've taken a look at that. We've taken a look at that. So we'll go back and fly through that area real quick. But we have to look at if we can find it, season finale races. Rules for the finals. Okay, this has been updated. I think this is where the update is. 12 racers in 2 heats of 6 will try to qualify for the finals. Final heats are determined by finishing place. Odd numbers 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11 will drive in the first heat, with the number 1 qualifier as the starter in the pole position. Evens 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 will drive in heat 2, with the number 2 qualifier as the starter in the pole position. That's fun. That's details we didn't have. That tells us more what to expect. From each heat, we move on to the finals. The top 3 finishers with the fastest time move on to the finals. In the event that someone errors out and is otherwise unable to rejoin the race, they're going to be assumed to be in last place, likely last place, or if their driverless car is somehow a superhero, it's the position where their driverless car finishes. If there's arrows in the final race, Upland goes a step further, automatically puts that errored car at the end of the list. Could you imagine somebody winning with an errored out car when they weren't driving and they're somehow the winner of the race? I think people would be upset. So that is the rule. That is a little differentiated rule for that. So that's easy enough. That's an update. Not too surprising. Again, leaderboards on this are going to run until the 13th at 9 a.m. PT. The leading 12 racers are going to be awarded prizes. The top 12 from Series 1 leaderboard will advance to the finals. Again, this is an important distinction. I did mention I wanted to look at a couple notes that people were having questions on. The finals are for the Series 1 race cars, Series 1 and the Stock Car Pro Series pro cars, the race cars. So this is not everyman, everybody who's got a car, everybody who's got a category having finals. I am racing in Series 4. I'm going to also race in the T's, the trucks. So those two series, but it's not really a race because it's a game of point accumulation on a leaderboard. That's ultimately what I'm doing because I'm not going to have that final race in either of those categories. I'm just going to see where I get. If I'm in the top 12, I'm going to see what prizes I get. And I get what I get based on how many races I participate in and how many points I earn along the way by positions I finish in the races I participate in. Again, this is for staked races. Staked races in the amount, get out of my way. Staked races in the amount of 1,500 UPIX, 5,000 UPIX, 10,000 UPIX, or 15,000 UPIX. This is something that is going to run again until, like I said, until the 13th. And ultimately, with each of the series cars that are going to be in here, Series 2s, let's take a look. Series 2, Series 1s, Series T, Series 4s, and carts. Those each have their own leaderboard. Top 12 are going to get a prize, except for in Series 1, where that has the leaderboard turning into a qualifying race and then a qualifying race into the finals for Series 1. I think it's fun. I think it's fun that Upland wants to create a championship league and then isolating it only to race cars, allowing people to race in other cars as well, but not having the same functionality because those aren't really what racing is built around. Do I hope that we get racing for our Series TRs because they're more built for off-road road, and we'll have off-road racing, we'll have off-road racing series, and people can race their monster trucks against a Series R, and they have similar stats, and be kind of fun to see those races happen. 100%. I'm right there. But I do see upfront race cars being race cars. That's their main utility. They're not primarily used to drive groceries around. I'm okay with that. I get that. I'm okay with that having its own race series. But we'll continue to see expansion in this more than likely. Hopefully Upwind gets on top of this. And again, the quick note here, there will be a championship. The championship is going to be at the Lucille racetrack that Upwind just constructed not too long ago. Kind of fun to see these championship type racetracks come into the game. This differentiated opportunity created solely for that race, for that finals of the season. And then the other thing worth keeping our eye on that is taking place, and we're getting some updates on over the time, is this idea of transportation coming to the game of Upland. There's a couple notes that are fun to point out. You have the opportunity to travel to some place that you could travel by land in your car. That's exciting. It is 1/5 the travel time of real driving. That's fun. That's a little speed up from the real world. But I do want to put some realities out there. I have driven down the East Coast. I have not driven east to west because it's a really long ride. But I've done some driving long distances. And I can tell you, it's like 24 hours from, northern New England down to Florida, down to southern Florida. It's going to be 24 hours worth of driving, from northern New England to DC, halfway down the East Coast, in the central Atlantic, in the Atlantic region. It's about 10, 11 hours to, start getting a little south into Virginia, 11 hours down when you get down into there, before you get down to South Carolina area. So we're talking about some pretty long distances, really long drives. You take those drives, you divide those by 5, you're still talking about a 2-hour, 3-hour drive down. If you're driving from New York and you're going to go to LA, that's a long drive. That's many, 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 many hours in a car. That is going to be many, 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 many hours for your time for your Block Explorer in your car to travel from one area to the next to get there. Keep that in mind. Read the numbers that Upwind gives you when you go and prepare like you're going to travel, and decide not to travel if it doesn't make sense for you. Because there's been a number of people who've been good sports. Plenty of them have been good sports, but just been surprised to see a day and change to move from one place to another. In some cases, that is what it's going to take. Again, it's a fun concept. This concept means we have more utility for our cars. This concept means that we have the ability to potentially travel to places that we couldn't otherwise get. So that is fun. Cities that otherwise don't have transportation directly between the two. But ultimately, it does take longer than a train. It does take longer than a plane. Pretty easy. Definitely keep that in mind. And also keep in mind when we talk about this that now that we have this utility, we now have our vehicles needing to have the assistance of you being in them, traveling between cities for those cars to move. They're not magic anymore. You can't throw them in your wallet, pull your wallet out of your pocket, shake, give it a little shake, give it a little jingle, and have a car pop out again. It's not like that in the real world. It's not like that in Upland anymore. It was for a long time. Now we have to actually go and look at at where I am. I have to get into the city, the same city as the car, and then I have to travel in the car to another city. Whew, it's exhausting. But again, that is part of the friction that Upland's built in. They built in this idea of your locality. I think they're going to continue to do it. Don't be surprised when it happens to map assets. There's people smarter than myself who've been saying that from pretty early on that the idea of cargo in vehicles, which Upland introduced a couple years ago, cargo in vehicles does very much mean that we are going to lose our ability to move certain items. I guess say certain items because there are other items that probably won't be affected, but that we'll lose the ability to move certain items in the game of Upland using wallets. We'll have to use an analog of transportation to get them around from one place to another. Keep that in mind and be ready for it when it happens. Don't be surprised. So with that, I want to take a look at a couple comments. I think I saw some cool stuff coming through. I don't want to leave people hanging there. I did go blow hard for a little bit here. What about making limited plus collections for FSA players? That would give them a boost instead of just a few that were quick scooped up the whole way. Okay, California Trading Company, I will want to put out there was a bunch of exclusives that happened to qualify as FSAs. In Stockton, there was a couple exclusives that qualified in Trenton. They were low enough cost properties to begin with that when you applied the multiplier in exclusive, that they were still going to qualify as an FSA. That's a huge gift for an FSA player, if you ask me, because when I go to buy an exclusive, that thing is gone in 40 seconds. If it's a classic, if people know that's an exclusive, they're going to go buy that whole row up in front of me. I'm going to be fighting for it. I'm lucky if they're there for 3 minutes. For an FSA player, those exclusives hang out for days, so long as there's not too many multi-account cheaty little guys out there. Upland's doing a better job of maintaining and weeding those out and getting those people into Alcatraz. It's not perfect, but it's effort that's being made. But so long as we don't have a lot of those cheaters jumping in the game and cheating, we do see some of those properties in those areas that are exclusive collections sit around available for FSA players for quite a while, a lot longer than they would on the open market. So that's already being done a little bit. California Trading Company, these big gifts, these big exclusives and rares, it does make sense because the way I've played the game, but also the way a lot of people play the game, it does make sense that you move up in the game and the big things, the shiny things, the exclusive things, the things that are, truly rare, truly special, the real pieces of prestige that are in the game. Those are for people as they advance in the game, more or less. I think that if you get lucky as a FSA player and you're in a vanilla and you mint an ultra rare, congratulations, you earned it. I don't want people saying that's not fair. That's not fair. That FSA player, they got this. Now they sold it. Now they're a director. Don't worry about that. I don't think that should happen. I say congratulations to that FSA player. But ultimately, going and buying, selling on the secondary, going and buying, selling in a standard release or in a classic release and buying that rare or that ultra rare, that is something that's generally reserved for players who have account balances, who have the UPIX, because they're not going to be cheap and they shouldn't be, especially if they're in a classic, because that multiplier is already applied. So with that in mind, I think that Upland hasn't been that bad. about collections in these two areas for FSAs. There's been a number of collections that have been available for FSAs. There have previously been entire neighborhoods that were limited, that were almost 90% FSAs. Upland's been doing that. They did that in, believe it was in Rio. They did that in Rio de Janeiro. They took an entire neighborhood that was limited, and it was, like I said, mostly FSA. And I couldn't go mint those, but FSA people could. They hung out for a while. So I do like that idea. I agree with you, California Trading Company. It's a good idea. It's one that Upland's already doing. They may be able to do more of, but I like to think that it's a good mix that's going out there, at least in these two cities, at least in Trenton, at least in Stockton. Had to get danged on a rare real quick. Yeah, that happened. That happened this morning. Some people got danged on those rares. It took a little bit to unfold, and then it was all unfolded relatively quickly this morning. And the solution, California Hub, as you're mentioning, good point. If you have multiple cars in multiple cities, if you fly into the city, you can jump in your car and you can get around. We have this hub that is called New York. We have this hub, or it's kind of a modified hub because you have two big cities, two tier one cities, not that far from each other. I mean, 5 hours by car in the real world, but not that far from each other in LA and San Francisco in California, where both of those cities are relatively close, relatively proximally located with some other cities around them, where you could keep a car in either city. If you flew in, jump in that car, and then get between those areas. Driving across country is taking a long time for people who are doing it. So that may be something you might not want to do. Maybe you keep your car in one in LA, one in the New York area, one, I don't know, one in the central portion of the country. If there's a part of the country, it's a part of the map. If there's something in South America where you want to spend time and have a car to move between cities down there, maybe keep a car or two down there. So we do have workarounds on this. I think this is a part of the game that's always been coming. Upland has always wanted to push locality. Upland has always wanted to put a little bit of friction, or more friction than we had previously, between people and travel, between people and getting to different places, so that they could build tight communities in singular locations, and B, so that there was a economic incentive for travel both ways, where there's a disincentive, don't travel because it costs too much, but there's also incentives to people who are involved in the travel industry, people who own their terminals, people who sell cars, where those people, they profit off the friction. They're the middlemen, if you were, in the travel around the map. So that's kind of fun that we're seeing some realization here. It feels a little more immersive that we have this other step we have to do, that we can't just snap our fingers and magic things out in the game of Upland. I'm okay with that. I'm not going to complain, and I'm looking forward to more of it, so long as we keep it fun and we don't build up too many roadblocks for ourselves as we continue on. Checking our comments in Discord, see if there's anything good over there, and then wishing you all a happy weekend here. Also, those FSA properties in those collections are so small that the collection bonus is not producing an insane amount of yield. Yeah, that's true. There's not an insane amount of yield because they are limited cost properties, but they couldn't be expensive properties. Otherwise, they would be outside of the value or the purchasable value for those players. It wouldn't be an opportunity where they could mint those properties as an FSA if they were higher cost properties. But yes, they are small enough mints that, yes, they're getting the multiplier if they get 3 of them, which is great, but they are starting with a lower mint price because they're an FSA player and they're not going to be minting 3 35,000 UpX properties. That would automatically put them higher than the 100,000 value cap to be an FSA minter. With that, I think that's the good ones. Oh, wow. I can't say that's the good ones. I'm going to congratulate Blue on her drive. I just drove to LA to mint some properties. Now I'm going to drive back to Santa Clara. Exactly. That's the type of travel that I see being more valuable by car. Kira dropped this picture of driving from looks like New York or Rutherford here all the way across the country. I mean, have fun, you know. Let me see this: 16 hours, 31 minutes. 16 hours, 31 minutes, 17 seconds to drive across country. Yeah, those 16 hours times 5, that's pretty realistic. So I think the upwind's not far off, but that is a long time to wait to come back. But maybe you do it before you go to bed at night, and you get up and you have breakfast and you say hi to the family, and you forget that there's a digital world out there for a few hours. You go and have a cup of coffee and see the sun out, and then you come back, and now you're in a place. I like the idea of maybe slowing down the game of Upwind just a little bit so we can have a little bit of life in the real world too. I don't know if that's Upwind's point, but let's take the balance where it lies. But back to Blue, I'm 100% with that concept, with the concept of your car in the hub node area, moving around between city, perfect. And then once we have these cities to travel to that are exclusive for cars, that becomes a tighter bound portion of that hub area. It almost becomes hubbed to a larger number of properties, but also tighter in a tighter hub with those who are closer, because most people aren't going to want to drive 4 hours, and I'm talking about in-game hours, 4 in-game hours to get to that little city that doesn't qualify for a train station as far as Upman's rules are concerned. So, that thought in place, people are more likely to be traveling in and out by car because that's all they can do, but in and out by car from the surrounding neighborhoods. We'll see how that happens, surrounding neighborhoods, surrounding cities. But we'll see how that ends up playing out. We know that Uplands talked about potentially doing it in the same quarter. That first city that is going to be mintable or travelable only by vehicle. They talked about that potentially being a short iteration after we got cars as transportation. So keep your eyes open. Upland has been playing this game of we don't have to make every single announcement. We want people to be vigilant. We want people to have their eyes open. So be vigilant, have your eyes open, and look forward to both the upcoming cycle 2 of totems as well as the future, fingers crossed, of cars as transportation headed to a new city or headed to a city near you that you can't get by train. So for tonight, I want to thank everyone for coming in. As always, on a Friday, we do things a little different. It's a little slow to start. We don't always have great news from the team of Upland, but we do like to touch on the things that happened in the day. And of course, at the end of every show, if you are in Discord, we want to open it up to the floor. It's always a matter of, if you've got something to say, come to Discord. Come live to the Discord Game of Upland's Discord and their cafe, Voice Cafe. When we do end the show, you're invited. Feel free to unmute your mic. Feel free to jump in, and I'm going to put it exactly there. If you're in the Discord cafe, feel free to unmute your mics. The floor is yours. Thank you, and have a great weekend.